Back when I was applying to law school, I was what they call a splitter applicant. Not by choice, of course, but because I had a low GPA. And I knew it was going to hold me back unless I did something about it. That meant I had one job to maximize my chances. I had to get a high LSAT score, so I went all in, and that motivation drove me to get a 175 on test day. And that score changed everything for me. Now, for those who are new, a splitter is someone whose LSAT score is significantly higher than a school's median, but whose GPA is lower. Think of it like this. A school has a median LSAT of a 170 and a GPA of a 3.8. You've got a 173 LSAT, but your GPA is a 3.0. So your LSAT score is above the median, but your GPA is below. That means you are a splitter. And here's why that matters. Law schools are obsessed with two numbers, your LSAT score and your GPA, because of the US News rankings. If your GPA is below the median, you hurt them, but if your LSAT's above it, you help them. And if you help them enough with your LSAT, they will overlook the low GPA. So your goal is to give them a reason to forgive your GPA, and that reason is your LSAT score. Now, contrary to the brochure talk about holistic admissions where they say they look at everything, your resume, your personal statement, your rec letters, and your softs, your decisions get made primarily based on your LSAT and your GPA, period. Your softs are not going to matter if your numbers are not within range. They don't lead with, I want to hear all about this person's internship. They want to know, what are the numbers? They're not going to look at your application if the numbers are not within range. That doesn't mean your essays or your rec letters are totally useless, but if your numbers are off, you're already in a weaker position unless your LSAT is strong enough to offset it. And the good news is it can be. Law schools are under immense pressure to keep their LSAT medians high. That's what rankings, donor money, and job placement stats are all tied to. So if your LSAT helps them boost that number, you now become an asset for them. Now, most students don't realize you're not going to fix your GPA at this point, and that's okay. If you're already a senior in college or you've already graduated, your GPA is pretty much locked in. You can't go back in time, and you can't redo all of undergrad as much as you might want to. Sure, you could go to grad school and get a master's, but that's not going to change your LSAC calculated GPA, which is what matters in law school admissions. Let's say you retook 3 classes from undergrad and boosted your GPA from a 3.0 to a 3.1. You're still not going to hit the median for most top law schools, and you've just spent months for an insignificant bump that's not going to change their decision anyway. But now imagine you raised your LSAT score from a 163 to a 171. That is an 8-point jump, and that's the kind of number that law schools are going to notice, and that's the kind of number that gets you scholarship money. So if you're asking yourself, should I retake undergrad classes to raise my GPA? Absolutely not. Instead, spend that time on the LSAT. Now you might be wondering, is it too late to take the LSAT for this cycle? Not even close. If you're watching this right now, you've still got available to you August, September, October, and November this calendar year alone. You could even take it in January or February and still apply to most law schools in the US. And what matters much more than when you apply is how strong your score is. If taking an extra month gets you 3 to 5 more points, totally worth the wait. Those points will do a whole lot more for your application than turning it in a few weeks earlier. More points on the LSAT means you're getting into better schools and you're getting more scholarship money. Every single point matters. And of course, the good news is, if you're taking the LSAT in 2025 and beyond, the LSAT just got a whole lot easier to study for because logic games are off the test, replaced by a second scored logical reasoning section. No more conditional diagrams, no more rule mapping, no more games at all. This is great news, especially for splitter applicants, because logical reasoning is learnable, it's predictable, and it's 2/3 of the test now, so any gains you make in logical reasoning are doubled across those 2 sections. And logical reasoning rewards practice and it rewards strategy. You don't need to be naturally good at logic to get better at it, you just need to put in the reps and reflect on your mistakes. So don't overthink the changes to the test, because law schools don't care which version of the test you took. They're never going to ask you whether you took it with the games or in the new format. They only care about the number that you get at the end of the day. Now here's the LSAT prep framework I use with my private students called the LASER approach. LASER is an acronym standing for Learning, Accuracy, Sections, Exams, and Review, and it's what we use when we create personalized day-by-day study plans for our students. L is for learning, where you start by learning each section of the test. You're not timing yourself, you're not rushing, you're just building a strong foundation in understanding the structure and the logic of the questions. Then we have A for accuracy, where you drill questions by type. There are about 15 different types of questions in logical reasoning, but you want to prioritize the most common ones, specifically necessary assumption, inference, and flaw. Then we move on to S for sections, where you're doing timed 35-minute sections to work on your pacing and building up your consistency, working on your time management, seeing where you might run out of time or get sloppy. Then E is for exams and endurance, where you're doing full practice tests, ideally at least 10 of them before test day, maybe 2 per week in that final month if you have the time available, where you're simulating real test conditions, you're timing yourself, you're focused with 0 distractions. And finally, R for review. Throughout your LSAT study journey, this is the most important part and the most often overlooked. You don't want to just correct your answers. You want to diagnose your mistakes, asking yourself, why did I miss this? What was the trap? And what was the pattern I didn't see on my initial attempt? I teach a method for review called the Socratic review method, where you slow down and dissect every wrong answer until it clicks. Because if you don't review, you're just going to repeat the same mistakes. And if you do review, though, you build pattern recognition, and that's how you get faster and more accurate over time. Now, you might be asking yourself, why do I need to put in all this work for the LSAT? How much does it really matter? Let's look at the numbers. Let's say you got a 164 LSAT score. You might get into a top 30 school with 0 scholarship money. But let's say you retake and get 6 points higher, ending up at a 170. That same school might give you $60,000 in scholarship money, or you might get into a T14. Same person, just a higher LSAT score. And if you're aiming to avoid law school debt, or you want to keep your options open for clerkships, big law, or public interest, this score could change your entire career trajectory.